In 1867, the United States made a purchase that many believed was one of the greatest mistakes in American history. For just $7.2 million, America bought a frozen land larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Newspapers mocked the deal. Politicians laughed at it. Critics called it Seward's Folly. To them, Alaska was nothing more than an endless wilderness of snow and ice, a place with little value and no future. But history had other plans. Today, Alaska is home to vast reserves of oil, natural gas, gold, critical minerals, thriving fisheries, and one of the most strategically important military locations on Earth. So, why would Russia sell such an enormous territory? And how did one of history's most criticized purchases become one of America's greatest bargains? This is the incredible story of the deal that changed history. Chapter 1: Russia's Forgotten Colony. Long before Alaska became America's largest state, it belonged to an empire thousands of kilometers away, the Russian Empire. In the early 18th century, Russian explorers pushed east across the frozen wilderness of Siberia, driven by the promise of discovery and profit. After months of dangerous travel, they reached the edge of Asia. Beyond a narrow stretch of water lay a vast, untamed land, unlike anything they had ever seen. Today, we know that stretch of water as the Bering Strait. Alaska was breathtaking. Towering mountain ranges, massive glaciers, dense forests stretching beyond the horizon, rivers rich with salmon, and coastlines filled with wildlife. But Russia wasn't searching for breathtaking landscapes. It was searching for wealth. At the time, sea otter fur was one of the most valuable commodities in the world. In the markets of China and Europe, these luxurious pelts sold for extraordinary prices, making Alaska one of the Russian Empire's most profitable frontiers. Russian traders established small settlements along Alaska's southern coast, turning the region into a distant colony known as Russian America. For a while, the colony generated valuable income through the fur trade, but beneath that success, a serious problem was growing. Alaska was simply too far away. Every supply ship had to travel thousands of kilometers through some of the world's harshest waters. Communication with St. Petersburg took months. Supplies were expensive, and only a few hundred Russian settlers lived in the colony permanently. Defending such a remote territory became increasingly difficult. Slowly but surely, the profits began to shrink, while the cost of maintaining the colony continued to rise. What had once seemed like a valuable possession was becoming an expensive burden. And then, a devastating war in Europe would force Russia to make a decision that would change the course of history forever. Chapter 2: The war that changed everything. By the middle of the 19th century, the Russian Empire stretched across nearly 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. It was one of the largest empires in history. But beneath its enormous size, Russia was facing a crisis. In 1853, war broke out between Russia and an alliance that included Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire. The conflict would become known as the Crimean War. Although most of the fighting took place thousands of kilometers away from Alaska, its consequences reached every corner of the Russian Empire. The war exposed serious weaknesses in Russia's military, economy, and transportation network. After 3 years of brutal fighting, Russia emerged exhausted. The empire had suffered heavy financial losses and was struggling to rebuild. At the same time, another concern was growing: Britain. Just across the border in British North America, modern-day Canada, the British Empire maintained a powerful military presence. Russian officials feared that if another war broke out, Britain could simply seize Alaska. Defending the distant colony would be almost impossible. Reinforcements would have to travel thousands of kilometers across Siberia and the Pacific Ocean, a journey that could take months. By the time help arrived, Alaska might already be gone. To Russia, the danger wasn't that Alaska lacked value. The danger was losing it without receiving anything in return. Selling the territory suddenly seemed like the smarter choice. But if Russia was going to sell Alaska, it had to choose the right buyer. Chapter 3: The $7.2 million deal. By the mid-1860s, Russia had reached a difficult conclusion. Keeping Alaska no longer made financial or strategic sense, but simply abandoning the territory wasn't an option. If another war broke out with Britain, Russia feared that British forces could seize Alaska without paying a single dollar. Instead of losing the colony for nothing, Russia decided to sell it. But there was one important question: who would buy it? The answer lay across the Pacific: the United States. At the time, the United States had just emerged from the Civil War. Despite the enormous cost of rebuilding the nation, Secretary of State William Henry Seward believed the country's future depended on expanding its territory and influence. Seward had long admired Alaska's strategic location and believed it could strengthen America's position in the Pacific, while opening new opportunities for trade with Asia. Negotiations between Russia and the United States began quietly. Representing Russia was Eduard de Stuckel, the Russian minister in Washington. Over several weeks, both sides worked toward an agreement. Then, in the early hours of March 30th, 1867, after an all-night negotiation, the deal was finally sealed. The United States agreed to purchase Alaska for $7.2 million. That's about 2 cents per acre. Even by the standards of the 19th century, it was an astonishingly low price for a territory of more than 586,000 square miles. The treaty was signed. Months later, on October 18th, 1867, the Russian flag was lowered for the last time in Sitka, Alaska. As American soldiers raised the stars and stripes, ownership of the vast northern territory officially passed to the United States. Few people standing there could have imagined that this quiet ceremony marked one of the most significant land deals in modern history. But not everyone was celebrating. Back in Washington, many Americans believed their government had made an expensive mistake. Chapter 4: Seward's Folly. Although the treaty had been signed, convincing the American public was another challenge entirely. To many people, Alaska looked like nothing more than a frozen wilderness at the edge of the world. Newspapers questioned the purchase. Politicians criticized it. Some believed the United States had wasted millions of dollars on land that would never be useful. Before long, the deal became the subject of jokes across the country. Critics mockingly called it Seward's Folly. Others gave it equally unflattering names, including Seward's Icebox. The criticism was aimed at Secretary of State William Henry Seward, the man who had championed the purchase from the very beginning. To many Americans, spending $7.2 million on a distant, icy territory made little sense. After all, there were no major cities, no railroads, no large farms, and no obvious riches waiting to be discovered. On the surface, Alaska seemed to offer nothing but endless snow, towering mountains, and unforgiving wilderness. Yet Seward saw something others did not. He believed Alaska's location would strengthen America's position in the Pacific and create new opportunities for trade and influence in the years ahead. It was a vision that many dismissed as unrealistic, but history has a way of changing opinions. Less than 30 years after the purchase, everything would change. Hidden beneath Alaska's rugged landscape were resources that would transform the territory from a national punchline into one of America's greatest assets. And it all began with the discovery of gold. Chapter 5: History proved them wrong. For years after the purchase, Alaska remained exactly what many critics believed it to be: remote, isolated, and largely unexplored. But beneath its frozen wilderness, history was hiding a remarkable secret. In 1880, prospectors discovered significant deposits of gold near Juneau. Then, in 1896, another major discovery across the border in Canada's Klondike region turned Alaska into the primary gateway for one of the greatest gold rushes in history. Tens of thousands of hopeful prospectors poured through Alaska, chasing dreams of unimaginable wealth. Almost overnight, the territory became a center of commerce, transportation, and opportunity. But gold was only the beginning. During the 20th century, vast reserves of oil and natural gas were discovered beneath Alaska's northern landscape. The construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline in the 1970s transformed the region into one of America's most important energy producers. Its rich fisheries became some of the most productive in the world, and its mountains, forests, and glaciers attracted visitors from across the globe. Yet Alaska's greatest value wasn't measured only in resources. Its location would become one of America's greatest strategic advantages. During the Second World War, and later throughout the Cold War, Alaska served as a vital military outpost, positioned at the crossroads between North America and Asia. Air bases, radar stations, and missile defense systems turned the once overlooked territory into a key part of America's national security. The land once dismissed as a frozen wasteland had become one of the most valuable pieces of real estate the United States had ever acquired. Looking back, the price of $7.2 million seems almost impossible to believe. What many people mocked as Seward's Folly would ultimately be remembered as one of the greatest land deals in modern history, ending the deal that changed history. In 1867, many believed the United States had made an expensive mistake. A frozen wilderness, endless snow, millions of dollars, seemingly wasted. But history has a remarkable way of changing perspectives. What critics once dismissed as Seward's Folly would become one of the most valuable land purchases ever made. Alaska's gold, oil, natural gas, fisheries, breathtaking landscapes, and unmatched strategic location transformed it into an asset far beyond what anyone could have imagined. More importantly, Alaska reminds us that the true value of a decision isn't always visible in the moment it's made. Sometimes decades to reveal its greatest truths. And perhaps that's why the purchase of Alaska isn't remembered as a mistake, but as one of the greatest bargains in modern history. Because every era has a story, and this was one of history's greatest deals. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Epoch Explained and join us as we uncover the stories, empires, and moments that shaped our world. Until next time, thank you for watching.